welcome to Best Laid Plans. This is your host, Sarah Hart-Unger, and this is a podcast where we talk all things planning and planning adjacent. I am here today with an episode about analog life, a fall reset, which was not my idea, but which I just wanted to extrapolate and expound upon because I thought it just sounded so nice. But before we get into all that, I wanted to do an update for the listener who asked for high contrast planners for those that struggle with vision issues, because I got a few recommendations from various listeners that I wanted to share for both this listener and anybody else who finds themselves squinting at really tiny numbers or really grayed out fonts. So interestingly, the first planner that was recommended to me by a listener named Douglas is so interesting looking that I am debating to order it just to take a look at it myself, but it is called the Marjolein Delhaas Planner, and that's spelled MarjoleindElhaas Planner. She sells it from her own website in the EU. I say she, Marjolein sounds like a female name, so in the EU. But then also there is a vendor called Wms&Co, which is abbreviated Wms&Co, and I'll link to this in the show notes, that sells them in the US. And the reason that he recommended this was that it has extremely large numbers for the days of the month. It looks very, avant-garde, very design district-y to me, kind of, just artsy and pretty. But it also does have some small print as well. So if you're someone who only wants large fonts and contrast in your planner, this may not work for you. But if you're okay with some of the features, maybe being a little more subtle, like the hours of the day, but then maybe the day markings being extremely in your face and big, or if you're just interested in a really interesting looking, very, chic design-centered planner, you should definitely check these out because it's super cool looking. Number 2, some people mentioned Rad Happy. Actually, a listener named Courtney is the first person who wrote in recommending this because all of their design is kind of black and white themed. They don't do a lot of grayscale. They don't do tiny fonts. So checking out their planners might be a really good idea for this listener who doesn't want a lot of kind of low contrast stuff. And then finally, I think the listener actually mentioned Passion Planner, but there were a few people that wrote in and just said, that is one of the most contrasty layouts that exist, and they also come in larger sizes. So some people really want to write pretty big, and so Passion Planner not only has really dark black and white printing, but they have, I believe, an A4 or almost like 8.5 by 11 or a little bit bigger size planner, so that would give somebody lots of space to play with. So if you have additional ideas for this listener, please let me know, but I wanted to share the ones that came up so far. So thank you so much for sending those. The second little order of business or planner related note that I wanted to talk about is anyone who's ordered a planner from overseas and is still struggling with trying to get theirs if they live in the US and they were used to getting things shipped without too much difficulty. I do not have my Hobonichi yet as the time of this recording. However, we're making a lot of progress because FedEx just updated the status to something like clearance completed. So I do think I might actually see that planner in my house in the next few days, maybe by the time this episode comes out. Hopefully, check the show notes. I'll let you know. But somebody else wrote to me, I'm not going to share her name, but this is super interesting. She wrote, I ordered a new custom planner from Personal Planner in Sweden, which is a brand I have recommended on this podcast in the past. And she said it was $36, $50 with shipping. She was prepared to pay more, anticipating tariffs and the like, but there weren't any. However, it was stuck in Atlanta for about a week. And then lo and behold, she said she got an invoice from UPS for $175 for warehouse fees. And she's trying to figure out what exactly to do with that. So this is, I guess, the state of our international shipping situation. I'm not saying this to be political. I just want people to get their planners. So just be careful when you are ordering from overseas. Maybe ask lots of questions about the shipping. The good news with Hobonichi, even though I haven't gotten my planner yet, is that they do use a company that does pay. Like, I haven't heard of anybody on the Hobonichi Reddit talking about surprise fees or anything like that. Like, once you pay the shipping, which is sizable, which has added fees and duty fees, in it from Hobonichi, you're not going to have to pay extra from FedEx or whoever they're shipping it from. At least I haven't heard that from anybody. But if you're ordering from elsewhere, this is an important thing to know about and to check into these days. Now, of course, I know not every listener is in the US. So, of course, if you're listening to this from New Zealand or Ireland or, another country, then of course, I guess you might be dealing with this already. And I mean, in a lot of countries I've heard over the years of people not wanting to order US products because of lots of taxes that they have to pay after the fact. So this is just kind of how things are right now in the planner landscape. Okay, so today's episode is going to be inspired by a Substack that I read, and I actually did my notes for this post on paper because the theme of the episode was that it was going to be how to have an analog fall type of episode. Now, I did not make up that title. That title comes from Julianna Salguero, who writes a Substack called Keepsake, which I did not know about before, but I read about it on the Modern Mrs. Darcy website, and it was entitled How to Have an Analog Fall. And I'm going to quote from this Substack. She says, "I want an analog fall. My goal in this is to complete a factory reset of my brain by microdosing the desirable components of the 90s lifestyle while still indulging in some modern pleasures." And this isn't the first time I've heard the 90s referenced in this way. I think those of us who were teens in the 90s or maybe went to college, started college in the 90s, we kind of remember this time fondly as a time with a lot of modern conveniences, not a ton of just like everyday conflict. I mean, of course, 9/11 came, but that wasn't until 2001. So the 90s were, they were fairly peaceful. Of course, there was conflict in the world. There's always conflict, but the 90s were good. We had a lot of conveniences, but we did not have portable phones. The internet was still something you had to like effortfully get on. And yet we could kind of live a lifestyle that looked in many ways similar today without a lot of the kind of online features that we live with every day and take entirely for granted. So this is not the first kind of 90s reference I've seen recently. And I am interestingly here for that. I mean, I often think and reflect on how life would be different if we didn't have the tech available that we do and the tech available that's probably coming. I am definitely one of those people that's very interested, fearful, paying attention to everything that's happening with AI and how that might impact creativity or feeling like the things that we listen to or read aren't real anymore. We don't know whether they're going to be real. And yet in the 90s, that wasn't even on anybody's mind. We did not carry a dopamine, inducing device around with us in our pocket, but we could still, send the occasional email. And I think we were even starting to have ability to do instant message. So like baby texting was happening, especially in the late 90s. So I don't know. It was a time, and I absolutely see the appeal. And she shared some really interesting ideas in her Substack, which I'm going to share some of them. She wrote about the idea of watching more movies instead of streaming much shorter pieces of media. Now, she mentioned TV, but I feel like the more extreme version of movies would be like movies versus TikTok or YouTube Shorts or something like that. And she also had a list of said movies that she was checking off. Now, her list was not analog. It was like on Apple Notes or something that looked like that. But you could certainly have a analog list that you are checking off as you're watching long form movies. She wrote that her idea of being analog was always having paper and pen available. Now, I am definitely here for that. Somebody who brings my planner with me to appointments still and has it out on my desk and writes various things down all day long. Definitely haven't let that one go. And it absolutely enhances my life. So I'm excited that she mentioned that. She mentioned the idea of doing more lunch dates. And I definitely think more just in-person stuff that we do with others is underrated and hopefully going to have a comeback in the years to come. So I like that she mentioned the idea of lunch dates, which sounds rather sophisticated and leisurely at the same time. She mentioned sending friends letters, which is not something not something I'm drawn to necessarily, which is funny because I enjoy using paper so much, but I guess I am just as apt to write a friend an email or send a friend a text, but still, I love this idea of doing things more slowly, more completely, and there is something very special about receiving like a handwritten card for the holidays. And then she had a list of other ideas one of which happened to be getting really into your planner. So we're going to take a quick break, but I'm going to talk about various ways that I'm thinking about personally how I might make my 2026 and hey, the rest of 2025 while we're at it, a little bit more analog, as well as just as a fun thought exploration, like tech that I did wish I had in the 1990s, like if we were starting from scratch and thinking about which elements of tech would help us to lead better lives. And I know this is a very planning adjacent topic, but that's okay. What would we actually choose to include today? So I'll let you reflect on that while we have our break, and I'll be back and share what I would include if I were starting from scratch myself.
Today's episode is brought to us support from Mint Mobile. If you're still overpaying for wireless, it's time to say yes to saying no. At Mint Mobile, their favorite word is no. No contracts, no monthly bills, no overages, no hidden fees, no BS. That's why you should say yes to making the switch and getting premium wireless for $15 per month. Mint Mobile's plans start at $15 per month, and there are no unexpected overages or hidden fees. All Mint Mobile plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all your existing contacts. So ready to say yes to saying no? Make the switch at mintmobile.com/BLP. That's mintmobile.com/BLP. Upfront payment of $45 required, equivalent to $15 per month. Limited time new customer offer for first 3 months only. Speeds may slow above 35 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details. Today's episode comes to you with support from IXL. The autumn season is in full swing, and IXL helps keep your homeschool lessons or school enrichment structured and steady, whether you're following a set curriculum or creating your own. I personally love the simplicity that IXL offers. I don't have to dig through endless resources. IXL is organized by grade and topic, so I can jump right into what each child needs. My kids have been using IXL for years, and I really trust it to help solidify concepts and meet them where they are. Just like each leaf changes at its own pace, each child learns differently. IXL adapts so kids can move ahead when they're ready or revisit a topic until it truly clicks. Make an impact on your child's learning. Get IXL now. And Best Laid Plans listeners can get an exclusive 20% off IXL membership when they sign up today at IXL.com/plans. Visit IXL.com/plans to get the most effective learning program out there at the best price.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Okay, I'm back. And so I was talking about the idea that if you're building a more analog life, you could think about the tech that we have today and picture yourself in the 1990s choosing from a menu of completely finished tech options and deciding which ones you actually want in your life. And I definitely will say I am someone who, as I've added pieces of tech to my life, have always done so with some trepidation. I remember how tortured I was when I got my first iPhone because I knew it would not be good for me. I knew I couldn't trust myself around having the ability to go to the internet at any moment during the day. And I procrastinated for a while and then bought one in like 2011 and had a love-hate relationship with it from the start. Some people talk about, and then I never looked back and I love my phone. And I'm like, no, I got it. I knew I was going to struggle with it. And then I struggled with it for like forever. It's still today to some extent, although again, very much improved as we've talked about on this podcast because I don't participate in any social media and I've really reduced the things on my phone that tend to suck me away from regular life. All right. So if we're starting with a blank tech slate, it's the 1990s and we're like, what do I actually feel like I would need or would pay for if it was available right now? I would say number one, email. Now, email did exist in the 90s in a kind of, it wasn't that popular. So it wasn't like people were getting tons of email, but I remember having a crush that I was emailing from camp. So people must have had email addresses. So email though, definitely. I feel that is a convenient way to communicate, including like sending PDFs or files back and forth. I think I'll keep email. Definitely a maps app. Personally, I use Google Maps. Obviously, various apps have different pros and cons to them, but I could have really used a Maps app in the 1990s. Don't ask me about the Tori Amos and Alanis Morissette concert that I never actually got to, even though I had tickets because there was no Google Maps, because I'm still mad about it. But anyway, I could have definitely used that tool. Music and TV and movie as streaming, I absolutely would have loved. I mean, yes, there was something very special about trying to capture your favorite tunes as they played on the radio. And then by the 90s, we had CDs, but you had to buy the CD. I will say the benefits of that was that you got to know the music you loved so, so well. Although listening to my 13-year-old and the way she knows song lyrics, I do feel that that might also just be a product of like the adolescent brain is very good at soaking up very detailed renditions of music because she's never seen an album in her life, but has memorized a whole lot of lyrics. So maybe that's just the age, but I digress. I would have absolutely loved the ability to stream whatever music I wanted back in the 1990s, as well as music. I think mobile check deposit is like a weirdly specific one, but I mean, that's an errand that once it existed, I never wanted to run that errand again. And I'm just so happy that you can send money or deposit money using your phone. And podcasts. I mean, I would have loved podcasts for doing chores, for cleaning my room, for learning about various things. Maybe I would have started one like way earlier. Who knows? But I definitely feel like podcasts are something I'm glad we have today. And I would have chosen to start if we had it. And then I was debating whether or not I would have wanted some kind of portable camera. I mean, listen, Polaroids existed. It's not like cameras didn't exist. It just was not instant gratification. And I actually am not, I guess it is really, really nice to be able to take videos of my kids and then have that for later. So, okay, fine. Some kind of portable video camera with a screen would have been really, really cool to have. And I think was just kind of starting to become available maybe in the 90s or maybe in the early aughts. I don't entirely remember. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Like, I can't think of a lot of other things. I guess DocuSign is pretty good. I mean, yes, there are some other apps and things that make life somewhat easier, but there aren't that many that feel incredibly essential. And I guess I do ask myself the question, like, have we lost more than we've gained? I don't know the answer. In some ways, yes, I think, and in some ways, no. So with that, some ideas of how I might want to try to make my life more analog going forward and the things I want to emphasize in the coming months that kind of go with this theme. Definitely journaling and writing lists with great supplies. That's something I was already doing, but I just want to lean into doing more of it. And I think I've talked on this podcast a bunch recently about how I used to do more freeform journaling. I did it a lot when my kids were little and I just had so many thoughts that were bottled up. And I think now that I have this podcast and I have a website and I do a lot of content creation, but I don't do a lot of private writing for myself. I would like to get back to doing more of that. And I have a specific analog goal of trying to do it with fountain pens in the new year. So fun analog hobby, or maybe very frustrating one, depending on how they work with my left-handed self. If you are left-handed and you have a fountain pen that you love, please let me know. I know that no matter what I'm using, I'm going to have to use, a blotter or, something to ensure that I don't smudge paper as I'm writing. But I'm really interested in trying this. And yeah, I think that doing my analog list would be even more fun with some really cool colored inks and pens. I'm going to continue one of my favorite analog activities of reading paper books. I want to keep taking walks and sometimes without a podcast in my ears. Now, I do kind of like music if I don't have a podcast, but I feel like that almost goes with analog life because it might as well be a iPod Nano or a Discman or something like that if you're just playing an album while you're walking and not necessarily listening to voices in your ear. I want to lean into making lots of plans with real people and saying yes to lots of just events. I want to do more baking. Baking is so analog, not like the sourdough type, but just more like muffins and fun desserts and things like that, and cooking from actual cookbooks. And then I have been doing something analog, which is that I've been going to more fitness classes in person rather than just streaming. And I do enjoy it. Even when the classes aren't, life-changing themselves, there is something really special about having an instructor and you working alongside other people and everybody giggling when they say we're going to do something really hard and nobody wants to, or things like that. Like, there is just an energy in doing things with others out in the real world. And I don't know, all of this analog, the point of it isn't to be analog, it's to protect ourselves from being crowded out by digital distractions and the time suck that ensues when we let ourselves and our time be governed by our devices. And I really do think the best defense against that is to be actively doing other things, whether those other things are, again, walking around, listening to music, or they're having a lunch date, or they are playing with calligraphy or going to in-person Pilates or, all these things. And so we can plan these things. We do not have to plan them digitally. We absolutely can. So I don't want anybody who is loving their Google system to throw up their hands in despair and think that I'm saying that's not a great way to do it. But I don't know, you also might want to play with what doesn't necessarily need to be digital and what might be more fun to bring onto paper, to bring out the fun supplies, to give yourself a little bit more room to think creatively without having to expand the size of the table. You can just draw anything you want on a blank page or a dot grid notebook. And I would love to hear from you guys about, I don't know, whether you are thinking about trying to actively move in the analog direction where you can in life next year or ever. Will analog be my word of the year from 2026? I don't think so. I mean, I actually have already started to think about it, but that seems like a little bit too narrow. But still, I think it's going to be, I don't know, maybe it will actually be a domain for me. I could create an annual planning domain that's like going analog and then think of several ways that I'm going to manifest that. So that might be an interesting way to bring this on. All right, well, this episode, just to review, we have covered some of the high contrast planners for our vision impaired listener. We have discussed my everlasting struggle to get my Hobonichi from the FedEx interwebs and customs, as well as just to be careful if you are in the US ordering from overseas to investigate exactly what kinds of duties and fees you will be owed on the back end. And then finally, we had a discussion inspired by Julianna Salguero. Again, her Substack, she doesn't know I exist, but her Substack is called Keepsake. And her post was called, I Want an Analog Fall, or How to Have an Analog Fall. And I just kind of love that idea. So if you're thinking about an analog fall, I'd love to hear your ideas as well. I will be back next week with some physical planning reviews, as well as some November Q&A. So I will see you then. In the meantime, I hope you are enjoying whatever kind of fall you are having, and I hope you have a wonderful week.
This podcast is part of the Sound Advice FM network. Sound Advice FM, women's voices amplified.